Well, hello. Good afternoon. Doc Fabiano here with another entry in the Endangered Salesperson's vlog. And today I'm thinking we're going to talk about consequences because consequences have a lot to do with why the endangered salesperson is endangered. All right? The consequences, we have to consider them. If we don't, well, we could not be so happy. I mean, men, we understand consequences. We know the consequences of how we answer the question, well, honey, do I look fat in this dress? And depending upon how you answer that, you have either good or bad consequences. Even if you don't answer, then you're probably going to have poor consequences and you're not going to end up with a happy woman. At work, consequences can come from good planning, make things go smoothly the way you want them, or consequences come from poor planning and something that you thought was going to happen didn't because you didn't take the time to think about it, plan it out, understand what the consequences would be. For every action there is a reaction, a consequence. But occasionally, sometimes, for every lack of action, there is also a reaction, a consequence. Now, if anybody's ever taught school or you know a teacher, they're fully aware of this because ignorance of consequences is what causes the student to face disciplinary action. And you have to be carefully taught, or maybe not taught. So at home, if the child receives some education or information about consequences, then you'll have a better student at school because he'll understand the discipline. All right? If you help your child understand that he can't swing the cat around by its tail, and if he gets caught doing that, he's going to get a whipping, then that's teaching him consequences. But if none of that happens, if nobody talks to the child about consequences, well, at school he's completely ignorant of them and could care less about them and pretty much does what he wants. How do I know? Well, I wanted to give it a try, and for 4 years I actually taught. So we got to see a lot of that. Now, when it comes to technology, my concern is that we really haven't considered the consequences of what we're going to do or what the technology will do. What impact will that technology have not only on the economy but also the people, and particularly the people within that sphere of where the technology is being placed. All right? Now, some of you may be thinking, well, okay, old Doc's a Luddite. Well, there's a lot of things about a Luddite that most people don't understand, but I can tell you based on my research that sometime around the turn of the 18th, 17th, and 18th century, back then, just when the Industrial Revolution was a nascent revolution, a gentleman who owned a weaving operation put in one of the first weaving machines, which put out of work most of the weavers. And this was a big issue with these guys because all of the years they had spent working on their skill and their craft had now been for nothing. And since they were skilled at weaving, there was very little else they could do. And they were not happy about this, obviously. It was kind of like the first downsizing. But anyway, in a fit of rage, a gentleman by the name of Ned Ludd went back into the operation and started ripping apart the machines. He was angry. He wasn't angry at the machine. He was angry at the fact that the owner did not consider what the consequences would be for him and his fellows. In fact, this movement picked up as the Industrial Revolution moved to the point where it was getting pretty serious. There were some demonstrations, and people were coming out against it. I mean, the lower classes were, yes, we need to do something. The upper classes were like, no, to heck with them. Lord Byron actually chastised the Parliament loudly for not considering what would happen to the common man as a result of the introduction of all of this machinery and so forth. And at one point, Parliament made it illegal. They passed a series of laws regarding people trying to come to grips with this and destroying the equipment and things like that. In fact, in one or two cases, it was considered a capital crime. But it's neither here nor there now, and whether or not Ned actually existed, history has some questions either one way or another. But we have to consider it. Recently, in my community, the newspaper announced that it was laying off probably, 40-50% of their people, going to outsource the printing, and for the last couple of years, they've been moving heavily to a digital presentation rather than the newsprint itself. Well, that's going to put a bunch of people out of work. They're not going to be happy about it. Despite the fact that paper is not obsolete and remains the best way to maintain data, right? You don't have to worry about upgrading paper. You don't have to worry about paper crashing. And I give you the Dead Sea Scrolls paper after all of this time. And there's people like me, old grumpy guys that like to have my coffee reading the paper. But what about those poor people that have been put out of work, that have been put out of their jobs, that have been put out of something that they spent a lot of time learning how to do well through experience and education, something that supported them and also gave them the satisfaction of being able to use those skills in their brain power to create whatever their responsibilities were. Where are we going to do? Are we going to consider them? Are we going to reposition them with jobs that pay as much and are equally as satisfying and provide value to that individual? Well, we haven't seen anything about that yet, so we not quite sure what's going to happen. But we haven't paid attention to that consequence, and we need to be concerned about that. I would like to see more people do that, so when technology puts people out of work, the company has a plan. Let's put them someplace else where they have some value, where we can use them and so forth. It has been written many times that with the advent of technology, we will need more employees, more workers. I don't know about you, but I've yet to see that. So we'll kind of keep our eye on it. But there's a gentleman here, actually from Human Kinetics. He says some technological advances cause people to be distracted, overly stressed, and increasingly isolated. Many people are involved in an abundant number of relationships through technology, but sometimes the quantity of those associations leaves people feeling qualitatively empty. Obviously, technology has had a profound impact on what it means to be social. We have not considered the consequences of spending our lives staring into those tiny screens and communicating our very smallest thoughts and events in our lives to broadcast out in the world to a select group of friends as well as the internet. I don't know, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me, Anyway, Emilio Estevez, I may have repeated this before, maybe repeating this, but anyway, that's Charlie's older brother, Emilio Estevez, brother of Charlie Sheen and father of Martin, had a quote I really like. He said, "In making things easier for people, technology has actually demotivated people from using their brains. We have all these devices to keep us connected, yet we're more disconnected than ever." Now, he's smack on with that. Disconnected, we very rarely now have a physical connection, communication with people. It's all done through a device, right? Tweeting, Instagramming, Facebooking, emailing. I mean, certainly these things have their value, but as a result, no one's considered the consequence that we are making people more and more isolated. And again, from the same book, this quote, he says, "We are at a point in history where very few people have given critical thought to new social realities created by technology and what those realities mean for the individual and society. It is apparent that technology has the potential to harm or enhance your social skills and social life. The key is to analyze how technology affects you socially. You've got to consider your own consequences here, all right? You sitting on the couch every night looking at your phone for the sports scores and everything else and saying 2 words to your wife, what do you think the consequences of that are going to be? All right? Or you're sitting there on the couch staring at your Facebook and texting all parts of the family and everything and not saying 2 words to your husband. What kind of consequence do you think that's going to lead to? Either way, fellow babies, stuff like that could end up pretty cold in the bedroom, couldn't it? You know, are you letting a few choice people know who you are and what you contribute to the world? Or are you entirely distracting yourself with shallow pursuits? Does technology increase or decrease your concern for others, your compassion for others, and your desire to serve them? Think about that. Have you thought about that? If you think about it and give it some thought, then you're looking at a consequence. Now, I used to travel quite a bit, and towards the end of it, the nascent instant communication age, and now when I see things, you know, you're sitting at an airport gate waiting to board the plane. You got some time, and you kind of look around you, and almost everybody around you has got their face in that little phone, okay, in the iPhone, or whatever you want to call it, tapping away, looking at it, whatever they're doing, communicating, reading, inspecting things, and so forth. Or you go to a family get-together, family dinner. Look around in the living room. How many of those people there are looking at their phones, are using their phones? All right. In either case, whether you're seeing them at the airport, or whether you're seeing them at home, or any other place where there's a group of people, do you wonder how many of them, if any, are analyzing how technology is affecting them socially? Do you really believe that they are? No, there's a consequence there. They're not paying attention to it, you know. They're not doing up the whole thing. I mean, do you really believe corporations earmark operating expense to analyze how the technology they are about to create will affect the customers, the end users, and those around them? Some do, but you don't know. And here's another quick peek of a consequence that most people don't pay attention to. Good old Google. They have a privacy policy that makes it clear that Google retains the right to make significant decisions about our data without regard to our interests. Add that to the absolute loss of privacy, both known and unknown, and all sentient beings suffer today. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We don't know. We really don't know what's going on there. Now, there is basically, if you look at it, a play that was made into a movie. It's called Inherit the Wind. You may have seen it. Inherit the Wind was about the Scopes monkey trial. It was an issue about the capability of thought. It was an issue about the testing of a law in Mississippi that said you cannot teach Darwin's theory of relativity. And at the time, it was a big deal. All right? And the characters there were played by Spencer Tracy and Frederick March, Gene Kelly, Harry Morgan, a bunch of people that you may remember. It was pretty exciting. But about in the middle of it, Spencer Tracy, playing Drummond, the defense attorney, has this really great speech. I'll read to you here. He says, "Gentlemen, progress has never been a bargain. You've got to pay for it. Sometimes I think there's a man behind a counter who says, 'All right, you can have the telephone, but you'll have to give up privacy and the charm of long distance. Madam, you may vote, but at a price. You lose the right to retreat behind a powder puff or a petticoat. Mister, you can conquer the air, but the birds will lose their wonder, and the clouds will smell of gasoline.'" So, as Drummond, what was Spencer Tracy saying here? Progress means that we have to affect an awareness of consequences. And the lack of awareness of consequences, don't think that most of the time it's deliberate or, shall we say, nasty, is why people are basically being downsized. Salespeople are becoming obsolete. You know, a whole raft of accountants and clerks and retailers and so forth, whatever you can think, all of a sudden find themselves not working for that place they used to work, scrambling to figure out how they're going to make some money, and questioning why do I take a job now for less money that doesn't give me the satisfaction of using my experience and my brain to do that. How do you think people are going to react if they have to do not necessarily a menial job, but a job that does not allow them to feel value to themselves? That's one of the concerns that I have. It's one of the things that I want to talk about. It's one of the things that I believe seriously is affecting the economy, the people, and sales. And we shall talk more about it. But that's consequences, friends. I wish you would consider the consequences of ignoring things that are going around you and spending most of your day staring at a telephone, or salespeople not endeavoring to continue to learn and not planning for every move that you make. So, thank you for paying attention, and I hope you have a very pleasant and fine day. Be well.